They said everything at Hartwell University could change in a single night. I never believed it, until the night I woke up in the library with the campus heartthrob's jacket wrapped around me. The world outside those tall windows was still dark, New York lights flickering in the distance, but inside the silent library I felt heat pressing against my shoulders. It wasn't from me. It was from the heavy varsity jacket, smelling faintly of cedar and rain, the kind of scent that didn't belong to a stranger. My heart stumbled. Everyone knew whose jacket it was. For 1 second, I wanted to believe it was an accident, that someone had made a mistake. But the fabric held me like a promise, and promises never stayed quiet at Hartwell. By sunrise, the jacket would no longer be just a piece of clothing. It would become a rumor, then a wildfire, and by the time the campus woke, my life would already be caught in the flames. Part 1, The Jacket Scandal. They said everything at Hartwell University could change in a single night. I never believed it, until the night I woke up in the library with the campus heartthrob's jacket around me. The library was supposed to be the quietest place on earth. Rows of dusty books, soft golden lamps, and the steady ticking of the old clock. For me, it had always been a safe corner. I worked here after class, stacking shelves and writing papers between shifts, building a life out of silence. Silence felt safe. Silence was mine. But that night, silence betrayed me. I must have fallen asleep on the long wooden desk, my notes scattered like fallen leaves. When my eyes opened, the world looked softer, warmer, wrapped in a weight that wasn't my own. I blinked into the half-dark and touched the fabric on my shoulders. It was thick, smooth, heavy with warmth. Not just any jacket, his jacket. Everyone knew it. The navy varsity jacket carried his number on the sleeve, his initials embroidered above the heart. Liam Carter, the golden boy of Hartwell, the one the entire campus watched whenever he walked across the quad. I had never spoken to him, never even looked at him longer than a second. Yet here I was, held by something that belonged to him. The jacket smelled faintly of cedarwood and rain, like nights spent under city lights and afternoons on the field. My chest tightened as if I had borrowed a heartbeat that wasn't mine. For a moment I wanted to believe it was a dream, that in a few seconds I would wake up again and the jacket would vanish. But it didn't. It stayed. And promises like that never stayed quiet at Hartwell. By dawn, my secret sanctuary was gone. The jacket had turned into a rumor before I even left the library. Whispers followed me across the campus lawns, eyes tracing every step. People stared not at me but at the jacket folded clumsily in my arms. Phones lifted, flashes blinked, the world shrank into pixels and posts. I could feel the story spreading before it was even told. The quiet scholarship student. The star athlete's jacket. The unspoken connection. Hartwell loved stories like that. They fed on them, grew them into legends, turned them into scandals. Every corner I passed carried a ripple. The cafeteria hummed with half-hidden smiles. The student lounge exploded with laughter, not unkind but not innocent either. The social media groups overflowed with blurry pictures of me walking out of the library at dawn, Liam's jacket wrapped around my shoulders like a confession I had never given. I wanted to sink back into the silence that had always protected me, but silence had already betrayed me once. Now the air was full of noise I couldn't escape. Hartwell was a place where image mattered more than truth. Liam Carter was not just a student, he was a story the university loved to tell. Star quarterback, son of a wealthy family, the boy with the smile that could make strangers stop walking. And me, Ethan Ward, was the opposite. A scholarship student from nowhere, building a life out of quiet effort, someone who had no business stepping into the light. But now the light had found me. It was not gentle. It burned. I felt it in the way strangers looked at me, their eyes filled with questions I had no answers for. I felt it in the quick footsteps behind me, the sound of people trying to catch a glimpse, trying to frame me into their stories. I felt it in the way my chest tightened every time I thought of the jacket, of the warmth it carried, of the boy who owned it. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe he had left it by mistake. Maybe someone had placed it on me as a joke. Maybe the whole world had gotten it wrong. But the truth was simpler and harder. Once the story began, it no longer belonged to me. Rumors at Hartwell grew like vines, climbing walls, covering doors, turning every corner into a stage. I was not ready for that stage, but the story had already pushed me into the center. And somewhere in the noise, behind the laughter and the whispers, there was a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. The jacket still carried his warmth, and with every breath I took, it felt less like an accident and more like a beginning. I walked through the quad, the autumn wind tugging at my sleeves, leaves falling in colors that looked almost like fire. My arms tightened around the folded jacket, as if letting go would make the entire world collapse. Yet holding on felt even more dangerous, like carrying a secret the whole campus already knew. By the time the day ended, I understood what silence had tried to warn me. Nothing at Hartwell ever stayed small. Not a rumor. Not a whisper. Not even a borrowed jacket left behind in the library. Everything had changed. And my life, once built in shadows, had already stepped into a storm of light. Part 2, Forced Proximity. The days after the jacket incident blurred together like pages turned too quickly. The rumor had spread faster than I could breathe, wrapping itself around every hallway, every classroom, every corner of Hartwell. What once had been my quiet campus life was now a stage I had never auditioned for. I thought time would soften the edges. I thought the whispers would fade. But Hartwell had other plans. It began with the professors. They noticed the sudden attention, the way students glanced between Liam and me whenever we happened to be in the same lecture hall. Their eyes lingered on me longer than before, as if I carried some hidden story written across my skin. They never said anything, but the silence around their looks pressed harder than words. Then came the invitations. Student groups I had never spoken to suddenly wanted me at their events. Fraternities extended offers of friendship that had nothing to do with who I was. It was not me they wanted, it was the story attached to me, the thread that tied me, however loosely, to Liam Carter. I carried his shadow like it was my own. I avoided him. At least, I tried to. But Hartwell was not built for hiding. The campus was wide, yet the world had a way of pushing us into the same spaces. We crossed paths on the quad, his presence pulling eyes like gravity. We shared the same library tables during group projects, though I kept my distance, burying myself behind stacks of books. I told myself it was coincidence, that the world was simply small, but each encounter left a mark, faint but undeniable. The truth arrived when the university made its move. Hartwell had a reputation to protect, a golden image polished carefully through the years. Scandals threatened that shine, but sometimes they also fueled it. And so, when the jacket story grew too large to ignore, the administration did not bury it. Instead, they chose to frame it. The announcement came in the form of an assignment. For the annual charity showcase, students were paired in teams to prepare an exhibition, something creative that represented the values of Hartwell. My name appeared on the list, written in sharp black letters beside his. Ethan Ward. Liam Carter. A pairing that felt less like chance and more like fate. The air seemed to freeze when I saw it. Suddenly, silence was no longer a choice but a luxury stripped away. The entire campus buzzed with the news. People whispered about how the university was capitalizing on the scandal, turning a rumor into entertainment. I became part of the spectacle, my life tethered to Liam's whether I wanted it or not. The first meeting was unbearable. Not because of what was said, there were no words between us, but because of the way the air shifted when we were forced into the same room. His presence was overwhelming, filling the space without effort. He carried himself with the ease of someone used to attention, yet there was a weight in his gaze that unsettled me. It was not the look of someone amused by the situation. It was something deeper, quieter, something I could not name. We worked in silence. Side by side, yet worlds apart. My hands trembled over the papers, his movement steady as he sketched plans and ideas. The distance between us was small, but it felt like an ocean. And yet, in that ocean, something stirred. A current, gentle but persistent, pulling me closer no matter how I tried to resist. Every day after that blurred into the same rhythm. Meetings in the library, afternoons spent drafting ideas, evenings rehearsing for the showcase. I told myself it was just an assignment, something temporary, something that would end once the event was over. But the hours we spent together began to carve themselves into my memory, leaving marks I could not erase. There were moments when silence felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating, but soft. A silence that did not demand explanation, only presence. The kind of silence that held warmth, like the jacket he had left behind that night. I noticed the little things. The way he leaned forward when he focused, strands of hair falling into his eyes. The way his hands moved with certainty, strong yet careful. The way the light caught on his shoulders, painting him in gold when the sun dipped low. These details slipped into me before I could stop them, weaving themselves into the fabric of my thoughts. And yet, the world outside did not let me forget the truth. The whispers grew louder each time we were seen together. Photos appeared online, blurry but undeniable, of us leaving the library side by side. Speculations filled the air, turning silence into noise I could never escape. The line between rumor and reality blurred, and I found myself standing in the middle, unable to step back. I tried to remind myself of who I was. Ethan Ward. A scholarship student. A boy who belonged in the quiet corners, not in the spotlight. I had built my life carefully, brick by brick, with no room for storms like this. Liam Carter was everything I was not, bright, golden, untouchable. To imagine anything beyond coincidence was dangerous. But the more time I spent near him, the harder it became to believe in coincidence. The air carried something unspoken, a rhythm that echoed louder with every meeting. It was not in words, not in gestures, but in the spaces between. The way silence wrapped around us, not empty but full of meaning. The way the world seemed to pause, just for a second, whenever he was near. I did not know what it meant. I did not know what it would become. All I knew was that the jacket had not been the end of the story. It had been the beginning. And now, forced into his orbit, I realized that beginnings were never simple. They carried weight, expectation, danger, and something even harder to resist, hope. By the end of the second week, I no longer saw the jacket as just an accident. It was a thread, pulling me into a story I had never chosen but could no longer escape. The showcase loomed ahead, promising more light, more eyes, more whispers. I told myself I could endure it, that once it ended, life would return to silence. But deep down, I knew the truth. Silence was gone. And in its place was something I had never allowed myself to feel before, something that frightened me as much as it thrilled me. Something that felt like falling. Part 3, Breaking Point. The days leading to the showcase felt like a countdown. Each morning carried a weight heavier than the last, as if the hours themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to shatter. I told myself it was just an event, just another obligation, but deep inside I knew it was more. It was the stage where every glance, every rumor, every unspoken thing would finally be exposed under the lights. I could not escape the thought of him. Liam was everywhere, not because he wanted to be, but because the world made him so. His presence filled the campus like sunlight, touching corners I could not avoid. Students followed him with their eyes, whispers trailed behind his steps, and somehow, all of that noise curled around me too. I had never asked for it, never sought it, yet it clung to me like shadow. Working with him had grown both easier and harder. Easier because the rhythm had become familiar, afternoons buried in plans, evenings filled with quiet preparation. Harder because the silence between us no longer felt empty. It had grown louder, heavier, layered with things that could not be said. There was a charge in the air whenever he was near, like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. I tried to anchor myself in the work. I poured energy into every detail of our presentation, sketching designs until my hands ached, editing drafts until my vision blurred. But even in the middle of that exhaustion, my mind betrayed me. I would catch myself watching him, how he leaned over his notes, how his hand pressed against the table, how the muscles in his arms moved with quiet strength. These details etched themselves into me without permission, and I carried them long after the day was done. Nights were the hardest. Alone in my dorm room, I replayed the moments in my head, the way our hands brushed when we reached for the same paper, the way the sunlight fell across his face through the library window, the way his gaze lingered too long before looking away. I told myself it was imagination, that I was reading into things that did not exist. But my heart did not listen. It beat louder, faster, every time his name crossed my thoughts. The campus fed the fire. Pictures of us continued to spread online, blurry snapshots of two figures leaving the library, walking through the quad, standing too close beneath the oak trees. The captions wrote their own stories, and the comments filled with speculation. Strangers decided for us what we were, what we felt, what we must be hiding. It was overwhelming, suffocating, and yet beneath the fear there was something else, something almost like yearning. I wanted to believe the whispers were wrong. I wanted to believe I could step away, return to silence, build my quiet life again. But each time I tried to imagine it, the thought felt empty. As if the silence I had once cherished could no longer satisfy me after knowing what it felt like to stand near him. The breaking point did not arrive with a shout or a scandal. It came softly, in the most ordinary of moments. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, the sky turned heavy with rain. The campus emptied quickly, umbrellas blooming like flowers as students hurried across the grounds. I stayed behind in the auditorium, finishing the last touches of our project, lost in the rhythm of paper and ink. When I finally stepped outside, the rain was relentless. The pathways were slick, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth. My clothes clung to me within seconds, the chill sinking into my skin. I should have rushed back to my dorm, but instead I stood there, staring at the storm, letting it wash over me. There was a strange freedom in it, as if the rain could cleanse the weight of rumors, the heaviness of silence, the confusion in my chest. But the freedom lasted only a breath. Because then I felt it again, that pull, that unspoken presence. I did not need to turn to know he was there. The air shifted the way it always did when he entered it, carrying warmth even through the cold rain. My heart stumbled, not from surprise, but from recognition. In that moment, everything inside me cracked open. The weight of weeks, the pressure of whispers, the ache of silence, it all poured out like the rain falling from the sky. I realized I was not afraid of the rumors anymore. I was afraid of what they might reveal. I was afraid of how much of them could be true. I had built my life on certainty, on rules, on the safety of staying unseen. But now, standing in the storm with the world blurring around me, certainty felt meaningless. What mattered was the warmth I could not ignore, the gravity I could not resist, the way my heart refused to stay quiet. The rain kept falling, soaking the ground, soaking us both. Yet in that chaos, something shifted inside me. I understood then that silence could not protect me anymore. The feelings I carried were too strong, too loud, too alive. I could not bury them beneath whispers or hide them behind bookshelves. The breaking point was not the storm, not the rain, not the campus waiting with its watchful eyes. The breaking point was me. My own heart, surrendering to what it had known all along. That night, as I finally walked back through the storm, my clothes heavy and my thoughts heavier, I knew the truth I had been trying to escape. I was falling. And there was no turning back. Part 4, The Confession. The showcase arrived like a long-awaited storm. The campus, buzzing for weeks, reached its peak that morning. Posters lined the halls, lights were tested again and again, and every corner carried the sound of anticipation. For others, it was a performance, a celebration, a night of recognition. For me, it felt like the edge of something greater, the moment where the silence I had carried for so long would finally unravel. I woke early, though sleep had barely touched me. My body was restless, my heart a constant rhythm that refused to calm. The world outside my window was soft with the glow of dawn, but inside me, everything was sharp. My thoughts circled endlessly around one truth: I could no longer hold back. Not after the storm, not after the way the rain had felt like an answer. The hours passed in fragments. I moved through them like someone drifting, half aware of my surroundings, half consumed by the weight pressing against my chest. The stage was prepared, the lights dimmed, and students filled the seats in waves of chatter and laughter. My hands trembled as I set out our work, not from fear of the audience, but from the knowledge that tonight would decide more than grades or applause. When the time came, we stood together under the stage lights. The auditorium hushed, the sound of hundreds of breaths hanging in the air. I felt the warmth of his presence beside me, steady and unshaken, as though he belonged effortlessly to that moment. The project we had worked on unfolded as planned, each slide glowing across the screen, each detail finding its place. Applause rose like a tide, swelling with each completed section, but I heard none of it clearly. My heart was too loud, beating in rhythm with something I could no longer deny. We finished to the sound of cheers, the crowd rising in approval. I bowed with him, my eyes drawn not to the audience but to his face, illuminated by the lights. And in that glow, I saw what I had feared and longed for all at once: the quiet softness, the unspoken truth lingering between us. It was not imagination. It had never been imagination. The rest of the evening blurred. Congratulatory words surrounded us, hands clapped our shoulders, voices praised our work. Yet every moment pulled me closer to him, every glance tangled us deeper in the silence that had grown unbearable. The night stretched on, but within me, a single thought pulsed, insistent and unstoppable: I could not leave this unspoken. Not anymore. When the crowd finally dispersed and the campus quieted, the world seemed to hold its breath. The night sky was clear, the stars scattered above like tiny witnesses. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves. I walked beside him, my steps uncertain, my heart determined. Each movement felt heavy with meaning, every second bringing me closer to the edge I had been avoiding. The place where it happened was simple, a quiet corner of the campus garden, where lanterns cast a soft golden glow and the world felt far away. It was not grand or dramatic, yet it carried a kind of magic. The silence stretched, not empty this time, but charged, waiting. And then, without words, the truth spilled from me. Not through sentences or explanations, but through the way I let go of fear, the way I allowed myself to feel without restraint. It was in the way I looked at him fully for the first time, not hiding, not pretending. It was in the way my heart opened, raw and vulnerable, offering itself without disguise. The confession was not loud. It was not wrapped in perfect phrases. It was simple, fragile, undeniable. It lived in the space between us, carried by the trembling of my breath, the certainty of my gaze. And in that instant, I knew he understood. His eyes softened, his presence shifted, and the silence transformed into something new. The world seemed to dissolve around us. The whispers, the rumors, the weight of other people's expectations, all of it faded until there was only this: two hearts finding each other in the quiet. The air grew warmer, the stars brighter, as if the universe itself leaned closer to witness. In that moment, I realized love was not a sudden fire, not an explosion of clarity. It was the slow build of days and glances, the gentle weaving of two lives until separation became impossible. It was the kindness of small gestures, the safety of shared silence, the courage of one simple truth spoken without words. The fear I had carried for so long slipped away. I no longer cared about what others might say, no longer worried about the eyes watching from the edges of our story. What mattered was here, was now, was the warmth that reached me even without touch. The night lingered, stretching soft and endless. We stayed in that garden, bound by the quiet confession that needed no further explanation. My heart, once so guarded, now rested in the open, no longer afraid of being seen. His presence was steady, certain, like a promise I could finally believe in. As I walked back later, the campus sleeping around me, I carried with me not just the memory of that night but the beginning of something new. The silence that had once been a wall between us had transformed into a bridge. The jacket that had once been a mystery was now a symbol, a thread that had led me to this moment of truth. Love, I realized, was not about grand declarations or flawless timing. It was about surrender. It was about allowing the heart to be known, even when it trembled. It was about choosing to step into the light, even when shadows lingered nearby. And so, with the stars still glowing above and the memory of his eyes still holding mine, I let myself fall completely. No hesitation, no turning back. The confession was simple, but it was everything. It was the beginning of us.